This episode is part of a series where I take already published memoir and break down what works and why, and what doesn't work and why. I found that when I'm teaching my memoir method concepts to my writers, they benefit from seeing how these principles play out in memoir that you can already find at the bookstore. This month, I'm looking at the memoir Ordinary Time by Annie B. Jones. Let's get started.
You are listening to the Memoir Method podcast, the place for writers, readers, and anyone who appreciates the collective power of our stories. In this podcast, we explore the impact of memoir alongside an examination of writing techniques and strategies used in the genre. Whether you are a writer looking for inspiration and guidance or a passionate reader seeking meaningful connections through shared experiences, the Memoir Method podcast is your go-to conversation spot. I'm your host, Charlotte, editor, writer, and the heart behind Charlotte Writes. Let's get started.
Ordinary Time by Annie B. Jones was published in April of 2025, so pretty recently, by Harper One. So Harper One is an imprint of one of the big five publishers, so she published traditionally. And before we dive into the foundation of this memoir, I want to point out that this is an essay collection. I myself write essays, and I love a really solid essay collection, and Ordinary Time is 100% that. I also get lots of questions from writers about essays, and so I'm looking forward to diving into this specific essay collection in this month's Why It Works or Not series. The subtitle to this memoir is Lessons Learned While Staying Put. The focus for Annie's memoir, her essay collection, is the concept of staying in a place while everything and sometimes everyone around you changes. When you are writing an essay collection, you have to have a centralized theme or concept that will tie everything together. And what I love about Annie's focus for this collection is that it is counter to a lot of memoir that you can find. For many writers, and I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, there's a reason why writers are drawn to explore this concept, but they latch on to travel and new experiences as an expression of transformation. Think like Eat, Pray, Love. You're traveling around. I can think of another essay collection that talks about what it is to travel and the lessons that you learn. Annie, however, shows her transformation in various ways through the lens of staying put. And so already this focus is interesting to me. It's different from what I've already seen on the shelves, and it also explores something that is familiar. The concept of transforming over a life, looking at the people and places around you. And in Annie's case, she has stayed put. And so she explores what that looks like in different contexts. In an essay collection, you want your focus to be just broad enough to be an umbrella for all of the different angles and offshoots of your collection for the different essays. So for example, the theme of home would be far too broad and probably not quite what Annie is getting at with her collection. The concept of staying put, however, is more specific than the concept of home, and it also has several different angles that she can explore: friendship, physical locations, religion and faith, family and marriage, and a sense of self. And in part 2 of this series, I will go into how she structures the collection and how she organizes the essays. What I find really strong about this collection is that Annie's focus is something that is familiar, while also being different from a lot of memoir that you expect to see on the shelves. And her focus is specific enough to provide a unique angle, while also not being so specific. You don't want to be so specific that you can only write in one way about it. But with this essay collection, she takes the concept of staying put and she's able to feed so many different ideas and stories and angles into that one concept so that every essay contributes to this focus, to this idea. Let's talk about the reader for this collection. And Annie's reader for this essay collection is really interesting to me because partly I perceive that she's writing for readers who are already familiar with her. Annie owns and operates an independent bookstore in Thomasville, Georgia, and she is the voice behind the podcast From the Front Porch. This entrepreneur and writer has actually been in my social media and podcast feeds for several years now. In terms of the actual publication journey, she was building her readership far before she wrote a first draft. And I'd be really interested to see when she decided to write a book, when she decided to write this memoir and essays, because she's been building this readership for 10 plus years. So in a lot of ways, her ideal reader is people who are already familiar with her, who she's already attracted and gathered into her world. The people in her community are bookish. They love novels, stories, and geeking out over those stories. And they're also conscientious of where they spend their money. Indie bookstore shoppers care about community. They care about the social and economic ecosystems that can support independent bookstores. And as an extension of that, bookish people, especially the bookish people who are attracted to Annie's style and her presence online, they love community with other bookish people. They love to be in connection with each other. And so just knowing what I know about Annie's presence online already, I can get a feel for the type of reader that she perhaps had in mind when she was writing this collection. And Annie has already established herself as an authority within the bookstore and reading spaces. Her audience trusts her book recommendations, they're interested in her insights, and they also feel that parasocial relationship that is really prevalent online. You feel like you know her, and that has come from years of her building a podcast and Instagram account all as part of the bookshelf, her bookstore, as a part of that kind of marketing push and that side of things. But it's really interesting to me to see that be leveraged into a readership when I don't think that she intended to build that audience as a preparation for publishing her own book. But it's really interesting to me how those circles have converged and where those Venn diagrams overlap. When it comes to the ideal reader behind Ordinary Time, I will say that the people immediately interested in this collection are likely people who are already familiar with Annie, but as any business owner and writer will tell you, you want your readership to be growing. I also wanted to think about the type of reader who could come into this essay collection without knowing her beforehand. And the reader that will be most invested in this essay collection is one who is thoughtful and prioritizes relationships. And that is pretty broad. If I were working with an author, I would push them to get far more specific if they threw that description at me. So let's get into the different types of readers. A mirror reader for this memoir, i.e. someone who shares Annie's lived experience, would be someone who still lives close to their hometown, more or less, or who hasn't moved much as an adult. In one way, I am a mirror reader for this collection because I've lived in the same town since I got married 15 years ago. I've seen people come and go and move around in my community, and I've had the same zip code for a decade and a half. And then you have a window reader, maybe someone who moves around a lot, like a person in the military, for example. And this reader would be interested in seeing a lived experience that is wholly different to theirs. There would be a curiosity with this reader, a desire to learn. And so in another way, I am also a window reader for this collection because I don't live in the same town or even state where I grew up. I don't have people in my real life community who have known me since kindergarten. Those insights that Annie brings to the table in this memoir are tender for the reason that I don't have that experience, and she paints it in a very thoughtful and intentional way. An essay collection to me is inherently more conversational than a prose memoir. It is easier to slip into that conversational attitude as a writer and author when you are literally writing different conversations about the same topic. When I teach memoir to my writers and I walk through their manuscripts, we spend a significant amount of time and energy identifying the conversation that they want to have with their reader. In Ordinary Time, Annie's conversation is about living a full life with deep roots. Choosing to stay put in a small town does not equate to having a small life, and she has this conversation through a variety of lenses and experiences. So regardless of whether you're a window reader or a mirror reader, you are going to find this conversation engaging. It's really easy to see yourself in these pages because Annie writes these essays in a way that feels like an invitation. And no matter what you are writing, what you're writing about, whether you're writing a prose memoir or an essay collection, you want to think about the message and purpose of your story to be a conversation, to be invitational so that the reader can come into the conversation and start to bring in their own insights, bring in their own experiences, and have an intellectual and emotional kind of volleying back and forth between themselves and your story and what you have on the page. An Ordinary Time, as I was reading this, and this is true for every good essay collection that I've read, and I'm thinking specifically of essay collections. They have a remarkable way of igniting my own imagination. In Ordinary Time, as you are reading, you start to think about your own friendships, your own families, your own jobs and risks and heartaches and triumphs. The way that a good essay collection is, and Ordinary Time is an excellent essay collection, is that it is a starting point for your reader. It's not like the destination, it's a square one for them to be able to think about and examine their own experience, because you have given them the invitation and the permission and the framework for doing so. And that is what I see play out in Ordinary Time. That was the experience that I had reading it. And so a superpower of any essay collection is that the reader can easily dip in and dip out, which gives them more mental and emotional bandwidth to actually converse with your writing. And I will talk about this a little bit more in part 2 of this series, but that is the superpower that is an essay collection, which is, that ability to easily come in and out of it. Can also be a kryptonite if you are not careful, because you want your reader to keep coming back. In Ordinary Time, it was very easy for me to keep coming back to this collection. So I'll talk about that more in part 2. So this is my editorial take on the foundational aspects of Ordinary Time by Annie B. Jones. I want to use this series to invite you behind the scenes into the methodology of writing creative nonfiction. If you are interested in learning the ins and outs of the memoir method and how to apply these concepts to your specific work, head to the link in the show notes and you can check out my memoir method program. And join me next week for part 2 of Why It Works or Not, where I'm going to go into the structure behind Ordinary Time. And fun surprise for Ordinary Time, I have something exciting coming up. So keep an eye peeled on your podcast feed. This is something that I haven't done in a long time on the feed, but I'm really excited. So I will see you on Friday and next Tuesday for part 2 of Why It Works or Not with Ordinary Time. See you then.
You've just listened to an episode of the Memoir Method podcast. The Memoir Method podcast is presented by Charlotte Writes. If you liked what you heard, the best way to support the show is to subscribe through your preferred podcast player. And if you're feeling especially inspired, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Leaving a review really does help other readers and writers like yourself find the show. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on my website at charlottewrites.co or on Instagram at charlottejanewrites. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. And remember that you have a story that matters.